Hi folks, today the video is about caulk guns, and if you're a DIYer or a tradesperson, I'm sure you have used one of these at some point in your life, and they're okay, but sometimes trying to get the finish you want is not great, and it can be very tedious and tiring having to do this manually, especially if you have a large surface to seal. And it gets tiring, and I've used this before in the past, obviously, to do the DIY job and sealing. And I have a big job to do now on my workshop, and because the workshop is quite big regarding space, I need to seal the inside and the outside of the workshop, and I do not fancy having to go around and do this with this type of manual gun. It just doesn't work for me. So I had a look in the market to see what was out there, and they actually have an electronic version of a caulk gun. So I went out and I purchased it. This, folks, is the DeWalt caulk gun, or caulk gun, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And because it's electric and it has different speeds that you can set it on, so you can have the sealant coming out pretty fast, or you can have it slow and you can take your time with it. And I'll go through the spec of this caulk gun, but basically you get two tubes. This tube here is for the smaller tubes. This is a 310 tube, but some of the tubes are 290. And you can get bigger tubes. You can get 600 milliliter tubes, which is the sausage tube they call it, and that's for 600 size sealants. But I only have the 290 version of the sealant. But something I want to point out on this, which is very important, that if you buy one of these guns, the first thing that you'll have to do is make sure that you're using the correct size pusher for the actual tube you're using, because you can see that I can fit that tube. That fits in okay. Now that's loaded up and that's ready to go. Okay, that tube works fine. Okay, but if I have the wrong tube pusher at the end, you can see here that it just doesn't fit. It doesn't go in the tube where that one does. So if you were to leave this on and put in this size tube, what will happen is the gun will push this plastic and it'll just end up damaging the gun. So the first and foremost, whether it's a DeWalt or whether it's a Ryobi or whether it's a Milwaukee, make sure you have the right fitting for the right tube. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. You're going to have a problem. Okay, that's first and foremost, I would say. Now, along with the big sausage fitting comes a metal runner. So you can see the runner here. This is a smaller runner for the smaller tube, and this is a longer runner for the longer tube. So depending on what tube you're going to be using, make sure you have it configured and set up correctly before you do anything. Now they do supply spare parts like washers, because this part here, they have a spare part, and we also have there's a little rubber seal there. They have a spare one of them. So obviously these are parts that wear out obviously over a period of time, and they give you spare parts to cover that in the actual box. So how does the gun actually work? Well, you have two triggers, and the first trigger here pushes out the actual arm here to go into the sealant tube and to push the sealant out. So the same principle as this one here. So when you do that, it pushes this metal part out and it pushes the sealant out of the tube. Well, that does the same thing, except it's now electric rather than manual. Now, when you've finished using the tube and it's empty, what you do is you push the top button in and then you pull this manually back, and it will pull this part back. See, you can see that it brings it backward and forward. Just here, this switch here is to lock the trigger. So if I lock that and I press it, nothing happens, because you're locking the trigger. You don't accidentally press that button and have sealant coming out. The other thing it does, which is very clever, is that when you're using one of these manual sealant guns, and you finish using the trigger, sometimes a small bit of sealant still comes out and you have to clean the head and tidy it up. But with this DeWalt, when you actually press it for a period of time and release it, you can hear it actually goes backward to stop that extra bit of mess of the sealant coming out at the end of the tube, which is a very, very good idea. I think that well done to DeWalt for coming up with that idea. And the last thing on this is the actual speed controller. So on the speed controller there, you've 1 to 6. So it's actually set to 1 at the moment. So if you hear what 1 sounds like, it's very slow. So if we turn it up to 6 and then we press it, so depending on how fast you want to lay down the sealant, you can decide on the speed of how you want to put it down. So if you're a professional, you probably, I don't know, probably have it at 4 or 5. But if you're a DIYer, you might have it at 1 or 2 until you get experienced with doing it and putting it down. But it gives a very good finish. And because it's DeWalt, the batteries are all kind of compatible, that you can use a compatible battery for it as well. So do I recommend this? Yes, totally. This is a brilliant idea. It saves me so much time and energy. The speed that you can use this and get the sealant down is so much quicker than using a manual gun. So I definitely recommend that if you can afford one of these. They're about 300 to 350. I know that's not cheap, but if you have a lot of work to do and a lot of sealing to do, I would recommend getting one. And the other thing that's on this, which is quite interesting, is a little metal bar. So you know, sometimes when you have your sealant and if you leave it and it dries up, it doesn't come out. Well, this metal bar here is for you to poke it down the tube so you can free up the sealant, and so you can use it, which is I know it's kind of a good idea. It's not bad. I think it's a good idea. But there you go, folks. That's the DeWalt Caulk gun, or Caulk gun. It's one of them words, isn't it? But I recommend definitely the Caulk gun for if you're doing any work or you're planning to do loads of work. I think it's a brilliant idea. It saves so much time. it does a good finish, and your hand at the end of it is not tired. So thumbs up for the DeWalt cork gun. But as I say, they also make these. Ryobi make them, Milwaukee make them, I think, and other manufacturers might make them as well. But as I'm a kind of DeWalt guy, I decided to go for a DeWalt version of the gun. But there you go. So I hope that helps you out. As I say, just again, another reminder, make sure you change your head to suit the tube you're using. Because if you don't do that and you end up using the wrong version, then you might end up damaging the cork gun. So just be careful of that. Cheers.